King Adebayo stood before the remnants of his council. Many had already resigned, unwilling to serve a ruler who defied their sacred customs. The room was tense, the air thick with uncertainty. Adebayo's voice cut through the silence, calm yet unyielding. "I am legalizing same-sex marriage throughout the kingdom." The council sat in stunned silence, disbelief etched on their faces. Without waiting for a response, Adebayo ordered, "Draft the documents," and walked out, leaving his councilmen in shock, the weight of his decision sinking in. Kwame stirred awake, his senses slowly coming alive with the gentle light of dawn filtering through the grand windows of the palace. The early morning breeze carried the sounds of the bustling palace, servants hurrying, birds singing, and the distant hum of life beginning anew. Yet, amidst all this, there was a profound peace that settled in his heart, a warmth that wrapped around him like a cherished memory. He smiled, his thoughts drifting to the man who had become his world, Adebayo. Just thinking of his name made Kwame's heart skip a beat, warmth spreading through his chest like the first rays of sunlight after a long night. This love, his love for Adebayo, was like nothing he had ever known. It was fierce yet tender, a connection that had deepened with every challenge they faced together. The very essence of Adebayo filled Kwame with a sense of peace, of belonging, as if every piece of his soul had found its match in him. The joy of loving him filled even the smallest moments with light. But as Kwame turned in bed, seeking the familiar comfort of Adebayo's embrace, his hand found only the cool, empty sheets where his love should have been. A slight frown creased his brow, his heart missing a beat as he sat up, searching the room. And there, at the edge of the bed, sat Adebayo, his strong back slightly hunched, his gaze lost in the distance, wrapped in the soft golden light of morning. The sight tugged at Kwame's heart. He rose silently, the sheets whispering against his skin, and moved closer, his movements light as a feather. Without a word, he slid his arms around Adebayo's waist, pulling him close, resting his chin on his shoulder. The scent of Adebayo's skin, a mix of sandalwood and something uniquely him, filled Kwame's senses, grounding him in this moment of intimacy. Softly, Kwame began to plant delicate kisses along the nape of Adebayo's neck, each one a silent declaration of love, of devotion. He could feel the tension in Adebayo's body, the weight of whatever thoughts burdened him, and his heart ached to lift it, to take that pain away. "You have your thinking face on," Kwame whispered, his voice tender, filled with a love that ran deeper than words could ever express. He gently turned Adebayo's face toward him, his fingers brushing against the king's strong jaw, guiding their eyes to meet. The look in Kwame's eyes was one of unwavering affection, a soft gaze that held the promise of forever. "What's wrong?" Adebayo hesitated, his gaze slipping away, trying to mask the emotions that stirred within him. But Kwame was relentless in his love. He moved to straddle Adebayo, sitting on his lap, holding his face firmly yet gently in his hands, not allowing him to retreat into his thoughts. "What's wrong?" Kwame repeated, his voice a soft plea, his eyes searching Adebayo's face for answers. For a moment, Adebayo was silent, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. But then, with a deep breath, he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "It's nothing really, Kwame. It's just that I've been thinking, you've been through so much since we've been together. Do you think we did the right thing coming out? I don't regret claiming you in front of the world because I love you so much and I want everyone to know. But sometimes I worry about the danger that my love puts you in. First, you were kidnapped by one king and then another. What's going to happen next? Who is going to try and hurt you next because of me? I love you so much, Kwame. If something happened to you, I don't think I can keep living." Adebayo's voice broke, and Kwame's heart shattered at the sight of the tears brimming in his lover's eyes. He could see the pain, the fear that lurked beneath Adebayo's strong exterior, the burden of his love for Kwame weighing heavily on his soul. Kwame cupped Adebayo's face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. His own eyes were wet with unshed tears, his heart swelling with the depth of his love for this man. "You can't think that way, Ade. We made this decision together. We decided to be together, and we knew it wasn't going to be easy. You can't blame yourself for any of it. I don't blame you, and I don't care what I have to go through just to be with you. I would do it all over again if it means I get to be with you." The sincerity in Kwame's voice was like a balm to Adebayo's troubled heart. He looked deep into Kwame's eyes, seeing not just love but unwavering resolve, a commitment that would not waver in the face of any adversity. "I love you more than anything in this world, Ade. I love you." And with those words, Kwame began to place gentle kisses all over Adebayo's face, each one a reaffirmation of his love, of his devotion. He kissed away the tears, kissed the worry lines on Adebayo's forehead, kissed the corners of his lips, and finally he kissed Adebayo fully on the mouth. The kiss was slow, tender, and full of emotion. It wasn't just a meeting of lips, but a connection of souls. Their breath mingled, their hearts beat as one, and for that moment, the rest of the world fell away. It was just the two of them, lost in their love, in the depth of their feelings for each other. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, a silent conversation of love and desire. Kwame's hand slid to Adebayo's neck, pulling him closer, while Adebayo's arms wrapped around Kwame's waist, anchoring him in place. They lost themselves in the sensation, in the taste of each other, in the warmth that spread through their bodies like a gentle fire. But just as the kiss was about to escalate into something more, a loud banging on the door startled them apart. They froze, still holding each other, breathing heavily as they listened to the voice that came from the other side of the door. "Hey, lovebirds, enough consummation already. Today is your wedding day. Come out of there. The mentor has arrived, and he traveled all the way from Sudan. The least you can do is come out and say hi. I'm leaving now, and I expect you to be out in 10 minutes. It was Jafari, his voice tinged with amusement. Kwame and Adebayo exchanged a look, the tension of the moment broken by the light-hearted interruption. Adebayo chuckled softly, and Kwame couldn't help but smile as they listened to Jafari's footsteps fade away. For a brief moment, they stayed wrapped in each other's arms, foreheads pressed together, soaking in the warmth of their shared love. But reality beckoned, and with a sigh, they slowly began to disentangle, knowing that the day ahead would be one of the most significant of their lives, their wedding day. Several months prior, when King Adebayo, Kwame, and Lumusi had returned from Sudan, Adebayo made a bold and unprecedented declaration. He and Kwame were to be married, and the entire kingdom was invited. This announcement sent shockwaves through his kingdom. The notion that a man could marry another man, much less a king, was beyond comprehension for most. How could Adebayo, the very embodiment of tradition and authority, defy such deeply rooted customs? Murmurs of discontent rippled through the kingdom. People whispered in disbelief and disapproval, their voices growing louder with each passing day. The controversy surrounding King Adebayo's declaration of love for Kwame had been intense, and over time, some had hoped they might come to terms with it, slowly teaching themselves to accept the king's choice because there wasn't much they could do about it. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just the upcoming wedding that had everyone talking. It was what Adebayo did in the days following his announcement that truly unsettled the kingdom. Shortly after his initial shocking declaration, King Adebayo summoned what remained of his council. Many members had already resigned, unwilling to serve under a ruler who openly defied the customs they held sacred. The remaining councilmen, nervous and uncertain, gathered to hear what their king had to say. Since Kwame had entered the scene, Adebayo seemed to them a different man. With a calm that belied the gravity of his words, Adebayo announced that he was legalizing same-sex marriage throughout the kingdom. The chamber fell silent, disbelief hanging thick in the air. The king's voice carried the weight of a man who understood the risks, but had decided that the love he felt for Kwame was worth it all. There would be no debate, no discussion. He ordered the officials to draft the necessary documents. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving his councilmen staring after him in shock. As if this decisive move hadn't angered the people enough, the very next day, Adebayo took an even more startling action. When a courtier disrespected Kwame by declaring that he was unfit to speak to him, the king's fury was swift and unyielding. Further investigation revealed that this courtier led a faction intent on undermining Kwame, hoping to make his life so unbearable that he would be forced to leave. Without hesitation, Adebayo stripped them of their titles, making it clear to all that Kwame was not to be touched and must be given the utmost respect. Whispers of Adebayo's defiance spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the continent of Africa. The controversy was on the lips of everyone. Kings, chieftains, and people from neighboring realms reacted with outrage and disbelief. Adebayo had not just defied tradition, he had shattered it, and the reverberations of his decisions were felt across the land. People even went as far as to coin a name for him, calling him the Gay King in hushed conversations and bold declarations alike. The land buzzed with talk of the reckless king who had legalized a love that most deemed unnatural, and they all watched, waiting to see how this story would unfold. Would Adebayo's kingdom fall as a result of this? Would this be the beginning of King Adebayo's end? As the day of the wedding dawned, no one knew for sure if anyone would dare to attend. Yet King Adebayo ordered that preparations continue as if the entire kingdom was expected to be there. King Adebayo wasn't surprised when he walked into the throne room on his wedding day and found that it wasn't packed. Though the room was filled with people, it was mostly occupied by courtiers attending out of obligation rather than genuine desire. He had anticipated this, but deep down, a flicker of hope had remained, a hope that his people might surprise him, might somehow find it in their hearts to come. Yet as he surveyed the room, his heart swelled with gratitude for those who were there, those who truly mattered to him. His gaze swept across the familiar faces, and his eyes lit up at the sight of his mentor and his lover, two men who moved with a quiet grace, in perfect sync with each other. Their unspoken connection was palpable, yet so subtle that if you didn't know, you might never see it. Adebayo couldn't help but admire the way they carried their love, a love that had endured in the shadows, hidden but never dimmed. He wondered how they had managed to keep their affair a secret all these years, how they had coped with living in hiding despite their deep bond. He made a mental note to ask his mentor about it later. Perhaps there were lessons to be learned, wisdom to be shared about loving another man in a world that refused to understand. As Adebayo approached, his mentor greeted him with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "I'm proud of you, Your Highness," the mentor said, his voice rich with genuine affection. "What you're doing takes immense courage." The mentor's lover echoed the sentiment, his approving smile a silent nod to the strength it took to defy the world for love. Adebayo's heart swelled with emotion. "Thank you," Adebayo replied, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you for being here and for agreeing to officiate the wedding." As Adebayo exchanged words with his mentor, his eyes caught sight of Jafari standing in a corner, a glass of wine in hand, that trademark mischievous smile playing on his lips. There was a glint in Jafari's eyes, the kind that always made you think he was planning something devious. Adebayo excused himself and made his way over. He had been so happy when Jafari showed up yesterday. Jafari may be troublesome, but he was the one you could count on to show up when you needed an ally. That was what Adebayo had grown to love about him. "Adebayo, my friend," Jafari greeted him, his eyes lighting up with genuine joy. They hadn't had a chance to talk since Jafari's arrival. "I was just thinking about you. You have more guts than any man I know." His playful smile softened into something more serious, more heartfelt. "What you've done, what you're doing, making it so that people like us can love legally. It's so... I don't even have the words to describe your bravery, Adebayo. I worry about the consequences, though, but I'm so proud of you." A lump formed in Adebayo's throat at Jafari's words. It was rare to see Jafari so serious, and his words touched Adebayo more deeply than he could express. He clapped Jafari on the back, trying to mask his discomfort with the intensity of the moment, but he couldn't deny how much it meant to him. "You know," Adebayo began, his voice steady, "the reason I did this is simple. What's the point of being a king if I can't even be with the one I love? What use is all this power if I can't protect the man I love? I'm just trying to make it clear to everyone that Kwame is not to be touched. And if they do, there will be consequences. I'm tired of other people's opinions, of what they think they're owed through those opinions. I've been a good king. I've treated my people fairly. How does this change anything? Me being with Kwame doesn't harm them in any way. I will continue to rule justly and ensure this kingdom is a safe place. All I ask, this one thing, is to be with Kwame. If they're not willing to accept that, then I'm sorry. I'm not changing my mind about this." Jafari watched his friend, a proud smile tugging at his lips as he noticed the determined look in Adebayo's eyes. After a pause, he said, "This might not be the best time to mention it, but did you know I was head over heels in love with you when we were 16? I was completely smitten, Adebayo. Even back then, you were like this, standing up for what you believed in and never backing down. That's what made me fall for you. But you only ever treated me like a brother, and that hurt like hell. That's why I decided to taunt you every chance I got." Adebayo's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with sadness. "I had no idea, Jafari. I'm sorry." "It's fine," Jafari said, waving it off with a chuckle. "I can talk about it now because I'm over you, don't worry. I'm completely under the Dark King's spell now. I don't know what love potion he's given me, but damn, it's strong. I can't think straight." Adebayo laughed, moving closer and placing a hand on Jafari's arm. "I'm really sorry. A good friend would have noticed that you were hurting." The two men locked eyes, sharing a moment of genuine honesty. It was a moment where the past and present met, where unspoken truths were finally acknowledged. But the intensity of the moment became too much for Jafari, and he broke the silence with a teasing grin. "And hey, another thing. You're insanely hot when you're being the bold King Adebayo who would burn everything to the ground for his man. I find that irresistibly attractive. Your determination, your love for Kwame, it makes you so hot I can't even." Adebayo rolled his eyes, amused by Jafari's attempt to lighten the mood, but before he could respond, the Dark King appeared behind Jafari, his presence as commanding as ever. With a firm hand on Jafari's shoulder, the Dark King's deep voice rumbled, "I thought you said I was the hottest man in the world." Jafari turned to face the Dark King with a mix of guilt and mischief in his eyes. The Dark King's glare softened as Jafari, in a playful act of contrition, flung himself into his arms. "Baby, of course you're the hottest man in the world. I was just trying to lift Adebayo's spirits," Jafari said, throwing Adebayo a wink as he clung to the Dark King. The Dark King, despite his initial sternness, began to soften as Jafari whispered sweet nothings into his ear. The transformation was remarkable, and Adebayo watched the scene unfold with amazement and wonder. Who would have thought? He had never imagined a relationship between the Dark King and Jafari. The two were like night and day, and just thinking about how they had come together made Adebayo's head spin. He was sure Jafari had used some trickery to win over the Dark King's heart. Yesterday, when he had been expecting Jafari's arrival, he had been stunned to see him appear with the Dark King. It had been clear from the first moment that they were together. The intimate touches and looks were unmistakable. Adebayo had stared in disbelief until Kwame had nudged him to stop. But now, seeing them together, Adebayo realized that, despite the surprise, he approved of their relationship. Jafari and the Dark King, though an unlikely pair, complemented each other perfectly. The Dark King needed the light that was Jafari, and Jafari, who could sometimes burn too bright for his own good, needed the grounding presence of the Dark King. They were an odd couple, but a perfect one. In the quiet of another room, Kwame sat with Lumusi, their hands intertwined, a gesture of solidarity that had grown between them over the past months. Since their return from Sudan, Lumusi had chosen to stay in King Adebayo's kingdom, determined to rebuild the relationship with her brother that had once been so strong. They spent nearly every moment together, talking about their childhood, trying to remember what life was like before the complexities of adulthood and King Adebayo's arrival had changed everything. For Lumusi, those months were a journey, a painful, necessary journey towards understanding. She had been raised in a world that told her a man belonged to a woman, that her future was a certainty. So when the man she had been promised to, the man she imagined building a life with, chose her own brother instead, the betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about losing King Adebayo. It was about losing the life she had imagined, the dreams she had been taught to hold dear. For a long time, she couldn't see past her own hurt, couldn't understand how Kwame's happiness could mean the end of hers. But time and the deep love she had for her brother slowly began to soften the sharp edges of her pain. As they spent more time together, Lumusi began to see the truth. Kwame had found something rare and beautiful with King Adebayo, something that couldn't be defined by the rules she had been taught. And she couldn't deny that her brother deserved happiness, even if it looked different from what she had expected. "I am so happy for you, Kwame," Lumusi said, her voice warm but tinged with a hint of sadness. "I always imagined you'd marry one of my friends, or maybe all of them, the way they've been following you around since we were kids." She chuckled softly, and Kwame joined her, the tension between them easing into something more familiar, more comforting. There was quite an uproar among the ladies in Ghana when they found out you were with King Adebayo. You broke many hearts. They both laughed, sharing a moment of levity that felt like old times, like when they were children and the world seemed so simple. But as the laughter faded, Lumusi's smile turned wistful. "And while I'm happy for you, I have to admit, I'm a little jealous that you're getting married before me. I always thought I'd be the first." Her voice grew serious again. "That man loves you, Kwame," Lumusi said, her tone filled with newfound understanding. "I've never seen anyone so in love before. When you were kidnapped, he was devastated. I'm truly happy you're with him." Kwame thanked her, and a pause followed, a silence that spoke of all the things they had never said to each other. Then, without words, the twins hugged, holding on to each other as if letting go would mean losing something irreplaceable. Just then, Tayo burst into the room with a bright, infectious smile, holding a rose in his small hand. He ran to Lumusi, his eyes shining with excitement, completely ignoring Kwame as he bowed deeply before her, presenting the rose with all the seriousness of a grown man. "Lumusi, I'm asking again, will you marry me? I found this rose, and it's as beautiful as you." Lumusi smiled, her heart warmed by the little boy's earnestness, and she took the rose gently from his hands. "Thank you, Tayo," she said, her voice kind and patient. "But you need to get bigger first before I can marry you." Tayo's shoulders slumped in disappointment, and he let out an exaggerated sigh, making Kwame chuckle from his corner. Lumusi's laughter soon joined in, filling the room with a lightness that seemed to chase away the lingering shadows. Tayo had been proposing to Lumusi every day since they returned from Sudan, each time with the same determination, and each time Lumusi had given him the same gentle refusal. One day, in a particularly endearing attempt, Tayo had even put on his mother's heels and layered his clothes to appear taller and older, proudly striding into the dining hall to propose to Lumusi in front of everyone. The entire table had erupted in laughter, but Lumusi had pulled him close and explained that when she said he needed to get bigger, she meant he needed to grow older, a process that would take many years. Tayo had been crestfallen, his youthful certainty challenged by the slow passage of time, but he had not given up. Lumusi looked down at Tayo now, his young face etched with disappointment, and she couldn't help but smile. His persistence was endearing. As they sat together, engaged in quiet conversation, a courtier entered and announced that it was time for the ceremony. Kwame rose, feeling a surge of nervous energy. The whirlwind of recent events had left him feeling as if he were living in a dream. Sometimes, late at night, as he lay in Adebayo's arms, he would whisper doubts into the darkness, questioning whether they were being reckless, whether the danger of their choice was worth it. But deep in his heart, Kwame knew the answer. Loving Adebayo was worth every risk. In truth, he loved Adebayo so deeply that he would have accepted living his entire life in the shadows, or even letting Adebayo marry someone else publicly if it meant they could be together in secret. That's how profound his love was. Yet, knowing that Adebayo loved him with equal intensity, willing to defy the world for their love, often moved Kwame to tears of joy during their tender moments together. Kwame's heart swelled with a mix of apprehension and happiness as he stood before Adebayo's old mentor who would officiate the ceremony. The room wasn't filled as he had once dreamed, but despite the sparse attendance, the faces surrounding him were those that mattered to him: Adebayo, Lumusi, Tayo, Jafari, and the Dark King. He felt a pang of sadness that his own parents could not be there, but he reminded himself that the presence of those who mattered most was more than enough. As the ceremony was about to commence, a surprising figure entered the room: the Queen Mother, accompanied by her retinue of maidens. Her presence was both regal and imposing, and Kwame's heart raced with a mix of nervousness and hope. He had longed for her approval, understanding the gravity of her acceptance in their cultural tradition. Months earlier, in a moment fraught with tension, Kwame had approached the Queen Mother to formally ask for her son's hand in marriage. In keeping with tradition, he had come bearing gifts and made his intentions clear, hoping to honor her role and earn her blessing. The weight of that moment had been almost unbearable. The Queen Mother's silence had been deafening, and her cold dismissal, turning her back on him and instructing him to leave the gifts on the table, had left Kwame deeply unsettled. He had left her presence unsure of her stance, heart heavy with the fear that her silence had been a refusal. But today, as he stood in his wedding attire, those memories surged back with renewed intensity. He felt his hands tremble as he awaited her presence, hoping against hope that he would finally receive the acceptance he had so dearly wished for. The Queen Mother stood before him now, her gaze softer, yet burdened with the weight of her emotions. The room fell into a hushed silence as everyone held their breath, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. She took a step closer and placed a hand on Kwame's shoulder, a gesture that was both significant and tender. Kwame could feel the weight of her internal struggle as she sought to reconcile tradition with her personal feelings. The tension in the air was palpable, each breath held in anticipation of her next words. "He is my only son," she began, her voice cracking with emotion as she looked directly at Kwame, then glanced at Adebayo before returning her gaze to Kwame. "Every mother dreams of what she believes is best for her child. I envisioned him marrying a woman, raising a family, and living a life of traditional happiness. When I learned that this was not to be, I was devastated. Despite knowing his truth, I had hoped it was merely a phase. When he declared his love for you and moved you into his quarters, I felt insulted. I feared for my reputation and wished you would disappear from his life. But over these months, my son has transformed into someone I barely recognize. I've witnessed a love in him that is beyond anything I have ever known. I thought I understood love, but this is something else entirely. Every mother wants her child's happiness, and my son has found that with you. While it may not align with my expectations, I love my son and he loves you. I will strive to embrace both of you. Congratulations on your wedding day." With that, she signaled to one of her maidens. The maiden stepped forward and presented a wrapped package. As the Queen Mother unfolded the cloth, revealing a crown of breathtaking beauty, Kwame gasped, along with the others in the room. "This was my crown," she said softly. "I had it altered for you to look more masculine. I hope you like it. Please, take care of my son and this kingdom." Tears welled in Kwame's eyes as she carefully placed it upon his head. He had yearned for her acceptance, but this gesture of love and recognition left him speechless. Overcome with gratitude and joy, he wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off the ground despite her playful protests. When he finally set her down, he was tearful and sniffling, his heart full. Adebayo rubbed Kwame's back gently, a broad grin spreading across his face. He hugged his mother too and whispered a heartfelt thank you to her, the love and gratitude in his voice palpable. Later, when the mentor's words of anointing filled the air and he declared that the groom could kiss the groom, Adebayo felt his heart thunder in his chest. He had waited for this moment, dreamed of it, but now that it was here, the enormity of his feelings overwhelmed him. He pulled Kwame close, enveloping him in the warmth of his embrace, his heart pounding with a joy so profound it felt almost unbearable. As their lips met, Adebayo kissed Kwame with a fervor that left him breathless. Every touch, every caress was a declaration of the boundless love he held for this man who had turned his world upside down. The kiss was not just an act of union. It was a testament to the depth of his feelings, the way Kwame had become an integral part of his very being. He loved Kwame with a ferocity that made him ache, a love so consuming it felt as if it could light the entire world. Each kiss was a silent promise, an unspoken vow to cherish and protect this love that had come to mean everything to him. He could hardly believe that the man who had once seemed like a distant dream was now his forever. The crowd erupted in cheers and whoops, their joy and celebration filling the room with a palpable energy. Faces lit up with unrestrained happiness, and Adebayo felt a profound sense of gratitude. The musicians struck up a jubilant melody as Adebayo and Kwame took to the dance floor for their first dance as a married couple. The song swelled around them, each note a reflection of their joy. Adebayo marveled at the sensation of being able to call Kwame his husband. It felt surreal, like a beautiful dream he never wanted to end. As they swayed together, Adebayo leaned in and whispered softly, "Hey, husband." He savored the way the word felt on his tongue, the new reality of it settling in his heart. Kwame's smile was radiant, his arms tightening around Adebayo in a hug that spoke of deep contentment. Adebayo felt a fierce, protective love surge through him, a vow to cherish Kwame and their life together with everything he had. The celebration moved to the banquet hall after the ceremony, where the air was filled with laughter and the rich aromas of a grand feast. The room buzzed with life as guests mingled, their voices rising and falling in joyous conversation. The clinking of glasses and the rhythmic beat of the music created a vibrant backdrop to the festivities. Revelers danced with unrestrained energy, their movements a swirl of colors and happiness. Adebayo and Kwame, glowing with the warmth of their union, moved through the crowd, savoring each moment of their shared joy. Drunk with celebration, guests approached them with enthusiastic requests to join in dances, and soon the entire room was caught up in a communal dance, swaying and spinning in a spirited embrace. The sense of euphoria was palpable, the kind of celebration that felt like a festival of the heart. But then, in an instant, the festive atmosphere was shattered. The doors to the banquet hall burst open with startling force, and a disheveled stranger stood in the doorway, breathless and clutching an envelope. The room fell into a stunned silence, every eye fixed on the unexpected arrival. The urgency in the messenger's demeanor was unmistakable as the guards quickly moved to restrain him. Adebayo's heart sank for reasons he could not explain, and he signaled for the guards to bring the messenger forward. He took the envelope with trembling hands, a sense of dread washing over him even before he knew its contents. Kwame, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, gripped Adebayo's arm tightly, his eyes wide with worry. As Adebayo tore open the envelope, his face grew solemn. The room held its breath, the once joyful celebration now hanging by a thread. He took a deep breath and faced Kwame, his mother Jafari and the Dark King, who had all gathered around, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. His voice was heavy with the gravity of the message. "It's from the Union of West African Kings," he said, the words falling like a dark cloud over the room. "I've been summoned." The Queen Mother's face went pale. "Summoned for what?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her fear mirrored the growing unease that rippled through everyone present. Adebayo's voice wavered slightly as he explained, "The letter says that my recent actions, specifically the legalization of same-sex marriage, have jeopardized my standing with them. They claim it tarnishes their image, and they're not sure if they want to keep doing business with me. They've given me a week to appear before the union and justify my actions." Kwame's face was a mask of confusion and fear. "What does that mean exactly?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. Everyone in the room knew well what the Union of West African Kings represented. They were 7 powerful kings, including King Adebayo, who controlled the gold trade in Africa, a crucial and immensely lucrative industry. The Union was an ancient alliance formed to manage and dominate the continent's gold resources. These West African kingdoms boasted the richest gold mines in the mainland, with Ghana holding the largest portion, followed by Mali, and then Adebayo's kingdom, which ranked 3rd in gold resources. Adebayo's immense wealth stemmed from his kingdom's share of this gold trade. The same was true for the other kings in the Union, whose collective control over the gold supply made them the unseen rulers of Africa's wealth. Each kingdom mined its own gold, but it was the Union that decided where and how this gold was traded, ensuring that the wealth flowed primarily through their hands. Adebayo turned to Kwame, his face etched with despair. If they cut me off like the letter suggests, they could bankrupt this kingdom. They can't dethrone me because the throne is my birthright, but they can ruin the well-being of my kingdom through economic isolation. Jafari's voice was tinged with frustration. Can't you just find other buyers for your gold? Adebayo shook his head, his expression bleak. It's not that simple, Jafari. They don't just cut you off. They make sure that no one else will do business with you. And they have enough influence on the continent to make it happen. They've done it before, and it's a very effective way to ruin a kingdom. A heavy silence fell over the group. Kwame's eyes were filled with fear and concern as he looked at Adebayo. What are we going to do? Adebayo's gaze was resolute but burdened. I have to present myself before them. And say what exactly? Jafari asked, his frustration evident. Will you recant your love for Kwame, retract the marriage, and undo everything you've done? This is ridiculous. Adebayo didn't respond. His mind raced, struggling to find a solution. He had anticipated resistance for defying tradition, but this level of threat was unexpected. As the weight of the situation settled in, the joy of their wedding seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a looming uncertainty. The future of the kingdom now hung by a thread, and Adebayo was left to navigate a perilous path with no clear answers. Stay tuned for the next episode as King Adebayo faces the toughest decision of his life. What will he do? You won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for watching.